And also, Hemal, Mr. Sanghi emailed me. He'll be joining a few minutes late or just right now. So we'll accordingly.
Sure. उसमें लॉगिन नहीं किया वैसे ही रख दो इधर अभी उसने चेक इन नहीं किया
He's joined. Okay. Mr. Sanghi is also joined.
Hi, sorry for being late.
No worries, sir. So just to let you know, we are going to go live in the next 1 minute. So you're right on time. So we'll just wait for the clock to hit 12 and then I'll make it live.
Great.
Morning, Sanghi sir.
Good morning. How are you?
Very good. So far, so good.
Morning.
Okay.
Good morning.
Morning, everyone.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to make this live. Okay, great. So participants have started to come in. I'll just start off with the introduction. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's session. This session is brought to you by the team at India's premium C-level two-wheeler event, Two-Wheeler Forum, or as we are more popularly known, TWF. My name is Rohit Devan, and I'm the event director at TWF. And for today's session, we have collaborated with Gates to bring you a session on the trend. To bring you a session on the trend analysis of the Indian two-wheeler market. And this session is aptly titled Future Opportunities and Impact Analysis of COVID-19 on the World's Largest Two-Wheeler Market. So in this session, you will not only obtain an overview of the key trends and future growth outlook of the Indian two-wheeler market, but also a view on the way forward for e-mobility in the Indian two-wheeler sector. So before we begin today's session, I wanted to take this time to especially thank our partner Gates for supporting this session. Gates is a leading global provider of fluid power and power transmission solutions and is on a quest to unchain personal mobility. Around the world, as demand is rising for alternate fuel methods of transportation, as people look for smarter, more affordable, more environmentally friendly solutions to get where they need to, Gates offers a broad portfolio of products that serve both the diverse replacement channel customers and OE manufacturers as well. So just to give you more detail on that, I'm just going to play a short video, a 2-minute video, and would direct your attention to the screen.
I'm a motorcycle guy, so I've ridden a lot of gas bikes. It took me about maybe a week of commuting on an electric bike to realize that I don't want a transmission, I don't want the vibration, I don't want the noise. I want to just focus on the road.
The first time that I rode a Zero motorcycles, it was a chain drive. And the only thing you could hear was the chain. And a chain, it is not a very pleasing sound. When I first got to Zero, one of my first calls was to Gates. And I say, we have to have a belt on this thing.
The magic carpet ride is the phrase we use to describe the feeling you get when you ride our motorcycles with the Gates belt. A long time ago, we used to have a chain drive, and it made a lot of noise and vibration. And the instant we had our first prototype running the Gates belt drive, it was so smooth. It completely transformed the motorcycle experience.
Part of what makes this motorcycle, the SRF in particular, is so phenomenal is the amount of torque that it puts out.
It's an electric motorcycle, and the powertrain is very different, and what we're doing with this powertrain is very different.
It's not easy to design a belt drive in a small package. We were able to make it work with the amount of torque that motorcycle is able to put out.
I was working with an individual that really got it, at Gates, and the team at Gates said, hey, yeah, let's see what that looks like. And what we ended up with, the original belt on the Zero motorcycle, was a pretty small an unobtrusive belt versus what you would see on an internal combustion engine. So that degree of collaboration was critical.
When I'm on a Zero motorcycle, I feel like I'm flying. With the direct drive of the Gates belt system, there's no shifting at all. You don't have to worry about, am I in the right gear? Combine that with 140 foot-pounds of torque from 0 RPM, and you've got arm-stretching, violent acceleration anytime you want it at any speed. You guys should get on a bike.
So thank you for your attention, everybody. Next, moving on to the structure of the session, we will start off first with a brief introduction to the session, and then have a panel discussion with few audience Q&A at the end. Other than that, we will also be running some polls during the session to keep the session interactive and invite you to share your insights. Before we start the session, just wanted to share a small ground rule. I would request all you attendees to direct any questions that you may have to the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. I'm asking you to do that as it will help us refer to your questions in a focused manner. You can also choose to upvote these questions. This will help us in addressing the most burning topics. So please note once again, all questions to be entered in the Q&A section. Also, we are planning for a physical event in June 2021 in Delhi. What with the great news on the vaccine and the related rollout, would be great if you can share your thoughts on the same in our short survey form that will open in your browser as we end the session. Your insights will be greatly appreciated, and it shouldn't take you more than a couple of minutes to answer this. So without further ado, I would like to now introduce you to our expert speaker group for today. Our first speaker for today's session is Mr. Naveen Munjal, who is the Managing Director of Hero Electric Vehicles, a part of the Hero Eco Group. Mr. Munjal has worked across various sectors, starting his automotive journey working at Land Rover. Post that, he joined the family business of bicycles at Hero Cycles. He then helped diversify the business by setting up the BPO business, the first of its kind in India. After that, he launched on expansion in the international market and then went on to launch electric vehicles both in India and globally. Our second speaker for the day is Mr. Rajesh Bhandari, who is the Senior Managing Director at Gates Corporation. He has over 30 years of experience, of which the past 14 years have come with Gates. He has played a key role at Gates in expanding the company to a dominating positions, both in the industrial as well as the automotive markets. Next, we have Mr. Jitendra Sharma, who is the founder and managing director of Okinawa Scooter. He has over 2 decades of experience in the two-wheeler industry and in the past has worked with Honda and LML. Next, we have well-known automotive industry veteran, Mr. Nikun Sanghi, who is the president of Automotive Skills Development Council and is also the founder of JS Four Wheel Motors. Mr. Sanghi is someone who has been vocal on the issues related to the automotive sector and is today among the top dealers for Mahindra & Mahindra and Hero MotoCorp as well. Our final panelist for this session is Mr. Pankaj Sharma, who is the National Business Head at Royal Enfield. Pankaj has over 26 years of experience in the automobile industry across CV, passenger vehicle, motorcycles, and also even in the consumer electronics space. Previously, he has worked with Volkswagen, Maruti Suzuki, Tata Motors, and Philips at various positions. Finally, our moderator for today's session is Mr. Hemal Thakkar, who is the Associate Director at CRISIL. At CRISIL, Hemal manages a large team of analysts working on multiple consulting engagements and research with a special focus on automotive and logistics. He not only has extensive working experience in research and consulting roles, but also has an exposure for working with Tata Motors in their CV division in the previous role. Over to you, Hemal.
Thank you very much, Rohit, for the kind introduction, and welcome to all the panelists. Welcome to the show, sir. Before even starting with the session, I would like to just lay down a backdrop of how the industry has been in the last 1 year. So yes, all of us are aware that the industry has been through really tough times. Even before we entered the pandemic space, the industry was in a very difficult stage with the economy not doing very good. New regulatory norms coming in like insurance norms, followed by ABS, CBS, and then BS6. So the acquisition cost for two-wheeler industry had gone up substantially in the last 2.5 years or so. and that led to muted demand, for quite some time. So, in fact, in 18-19, we just managed to grow by about 5%. In 19-20, the industry declined by about 17%. And probably this year we may end at about 14-15% decline. Motorcycles, if you see for the year till date, have been in the range of about 15 to 20% decline. Scooters have seen a higher decline of about 25 to 30%, and mopeds have seen a decline of about 5 odd percent. Now, what is important is the urban side has been fairly slow, with a lot of stringent lockdowns being there. The rural has still been doing well, and hence you see motorcycles doing far better than scooters. Scooters have slowly started to catch up because as urban unlock has happened, and we are now seeing good, kind of momentum in that space. As per CRISIL estimates, we are expecting the GDP to grow by about 11%, in the coming year. The real GDP, which means the nominal GDP growth is going to be 15% plus, and which means people will have money to spend. Consumption should start, and it's a good sign for two-wheelers for that matter. And I feel that this is going to be an year where we should definitely see a high double-digit growth in the two-wheeler industry. Also, with fuel prices going high at a substantial pace, and with commodity prices increasing, the gap between electric vehicles and your ICE vehicles is slowly, gradually narrowing. So from that perspective, it will be interesting to also know the view of the panelists as to how they are seeing this entire situation pan out going forward. And electric vehicles is another area where we would want some inputs from the panelist side. So, with this backdrop, I would like to invite each one of the panelists to, share their initial views on how they are seeing the industry today and what is their expectation, of the industry, kind of going forward. And then, probably we can get into a session where we could have specific questions for each of the panelists. So, Mr. Munjal, if we could start with you and then, one by one with the others.
Thank you, Himal, and thank you, Rohit. It's an absolute pleasure being here today. Good afternoon, everybody. So just to start, first and foremost, I just want to set the stage right in terms of the vehicles itself. When we look at e-mobility and the various reports that we actually read, they effectively, essentially, mainly talk about cars. They don't talk so much about, it's not centered around two-wheelers. Now, when we look at different forms of mobility, whether it's two-wheelers, three-wheelers, cars, public transport, commercial vehicles, etc., all of that, all have different needs, all have different requirements in terms of both the infrastructure and in terms of the vehicles itself and how they would take off. Now, the bottom of the low-hanging fruit, as we call it, for the conversion to happen would actually be the two-wheelers and the three-wheelers and public transport, because that's what actually carries. Between the public transport and two-wheelers, 30% of all the people of the entire population of India actually travels and commutes. So that's a very, very large part of the overall pie. And that's also a pie where the gap, as Himal was saying, is reducing between the IC and electric vehicles. So what's happening is that the battery prices over the last 10 years have actually already declined 85%. So we are seeing a moods curve where the battery prices are going to continue to drop for electric mobility, but they will stabilize at a certain point. And then what we're going to see is actually better performance of those batteries. So maybe in the same form factor, you may have more density of the battery. And whereas when it comes to IC, you are going to see an upward incline, which is the prices are going to continue increasing simply because of the emission norms that are going to keep on coming in. So heavier investments have got to be made. And we are seeing the petrol price and the diesel price right now, which is at an all-time high. Whereby, so what's happening, the electric mobility two-wheelers specifically that I'm looking at, the initial purchase price is very, very desirable. It's actually much lower than that of IC engine. The total running cost of the vehicle is much lower. The maintenance cost is much lower, and I'd be happy to talk more about it later during the course of the panel discussion. But we are already seeing growth happening. So whether it is a push from the government or the pull from the customers, whether it's B2B or B2C, there is a shift which is already happening. It's already begun happening. So disruption is on its way. That's my opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Munjal. Mr. Chitender Sharma, would you like to add on a few points there?
Sure, Himal. And thank you, Himal, for inviting me here. And thanks to Rohit also for this two-wheeler forum. So actually what Mr. Munjal said, I'm also agreed to him. But by the same time, if you see the overall disruption of the electrification of the automobile industry is already started, is already happened. Because if you see the overall two-wheeler market, because in the automobile industry, 80% of the pie is captured by the two-wheeler industry only. And if you see, the more electrification of the vehicle is going to happen for the EV, for the two-wheeler only, because that makes sense also. Because whenever we talk about the electric vehicle, the first question comes in the mind of the people, what about the infrastructure? But actually the infrastructure is required, like the charging stations. But I think the charging station is required for the three-wheeler and the four-wheeler, because in the two-wheeler, where the battery is already detachable, battery is already available, where you can charge at your home, you can charge at your office, and wherever you can charge it at your own convenience. Like when we buy the mobile phone, we never talk about the infrastructure, because we know it is at our ease, it's our convenience, we can charge anywhere. So why we, when we talk about the two-wheeler, why we need an infrastructure? Because that is the hurdle coming in to adoption of the electric vehicles. So that is the knowledge or the awareness we have to bring to the table to our consumer, so that they can understand that electric vehicle is altogether is feasible for the consumer in terms of the economics, in terms of the running cost, in terms of the capital cost, in terms of the charging. Because if you see, after BS6, the cost of ICE engine is already increased. So if you see, because the cost is also reduced, the infrastructure is not required for the two-wheeler, and by the same time, the performance vehicle is already available, which can match the performance of the electric vehicle with the IC engine. So it makes sense. I think it is going to happen very soon and very rapidly, the change over of the IC engine with the EV industry is going to happen. And I think it is better for the society and for next generation also, so that we can bring a good environment for our future in terms of pollution, in terms of other things. And apart from this battery, of course, there's a lots of technologies coming in. So we will talk further when we talk on the panel about few questions, then we'll talk.
Sure. Thank you for your remarks, sir. Mr. Pankaj, if you would like to share your views.
Thank you, Himal, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope you all are doing better than before. So even though I would say we'll talk about EV vehicles, but I think EV will remain as a part of two-wheeler. So let me just touch upon the two-wheeler industry as a whole. I think everybody has had a very tough time in last 10, 12 months. And the good news is that at least last 4, 5, 6 months were much better than first 4, 5, 6 months. And no one has expected in the beginning of, I would say, this financial year that this would be the end. This will be the positive outcome of this year. I think everyone was very, very pessimistic in the first quarter. And then as things started opening up and lockdown started happening in most part of the country, I must say, I think the industry bounced back surprisingly. While we were closer to the festival season, of course, this supply was always catching with the demand and all that. But I must say Q3 and Q4, which is currently running, was far better. So overall, I would say this financial is going to, even though it might show a higher double-digit growth, in the sense less than 20%, but I think the end is going to be very, very well. And we have seen in last 2-3 months, overall industry has done well. So we are quite optimistic, but we are also not seeing that. We don't know how long will it go like this and how will it continue, because in some markets, all these news we keep reading, lockdown starting happening, people are thinking. But I think as a whole, things have started looking up. Things are looking much better, and demand is coming back. While coming to electric vehicle, I would say, of course, that is definitely is the future. How soon or how late? I think that's the point to be discussed, and I'm sure this will be discussed during this another maybe 60 minutes or so. So maybe at that time we'll make few comments. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your opening remarks, Mr. Pankaj. Mr. Sanghi, if you would want to kind of make a few comments.
So thank you for having me here. And so I guess I agree with the panel that the future is EVs. And I also am concerned about the cost of acquisition of two-wheelers, specifically IC engines. With emission norms, safety norms, and more regulation coming up, the cost of acquisition of two-wheelers is really, really going up. While the industry did, probably the two-wheeler industry was the one which bounced back the fastest when the lockdown happened. And you saw in June, July, August, probably highest ever retails, far, far beyond expectations. But since then, I think since the festival season, we are seeing some dampening, some amount of dampening of demand. And I think that's more to do with both the cost of acquisition and the fact that the fuel prices have gone up. And also probably the people at the bottom of the pyramid, people who are the ones who are going to buy two-wheelers, and I'm talking specifically about entry-level two-wheelers and the executive segment. I think they still are under a lot of stress when it comes to their finances and are also very uncertain about their future income and therefore the dampening. And the fact that this quarter is one quarter which is driven by demand because of marriages, and unfortunately this quarter does not have too many muhurats for marriages. Specifically in the northwest and east, we see an impact of marriage muhurats on the two-wheeler demand. But going forward, I think we will come back. I am positive about the two-wheeler industry. Coming to EVs, and I guess three-wheelers were the first to jump the EV wagon, and two-wheelers are definitely the next. What my concern definitely is, and I hope the government does something about it, is to incentivize the introduction of two-wheelers, EV two-wheelers. I think the current FAME policy is not as inclined as it used to be, and I would definitely want to see a better incentivization for two-wheelers, because as on date, two-wheelers, the EV two-wheeler cost of acquisition is still reasonably high. The second problem that I see in EVs is the concern of financiers. They are still not as open to financing an EV as they are to IC engines, and I think their concern lies mainly with the cost of a battery within the two-wheeler. And that being so, I think they are a little hesitant about financing of EVs. But I think two-wheelers definitely is the lowest hanging fruit, and conversions will happen much faster than we ever anticipated. Conversion to EV in two-wheeler space, you will, in the next couple of years, see happening at a much, much faster space than any other segment in the auto industry. Those are my initial remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanghi. Mr. Bhandari, we would like to share your inputs, being one of the key input or component suppliers to the EV space, it will be good to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So thanks for bringing me on the panel, and welcome to all the panelists. So I echo the same, thought and the same feeling of our panelists that EV is there to stay. It is a matter of time now. It's something like, when the mobile phones came in, it was a gestation period, and when it went, just went up, it went up like without following the PLC. It did not follow the product life cycle of a growth phase, and then there is a maturity and all that. It continues to grow and grow rapidly. So we strongly believe that e-mobility is going to be coming in and it's going to stay. There are a few things beyond what people have said about is urbanization. It's happening more and more. We can see that a lot of people moving towards urban areas. Then the environmental awareness is going up. So that's another big factor. I think a lot of voluntarily people are going to shift from IC to the e-mobility. Then COVID has also helped in micro-mobility, so like people want to have their own vehicle rather than pillion ridings or, mass transportation usages. So I think that's another factor which will help hasten the process of e-mobility. And there is another factor which which will be helpful is the charging infrastructure, what we had been talking about. So I think as this becomes a differentiating factor, more of the infrastructure will come in the common areas like malls and petrol pumps and those kind of areas. People will prefer those who have that. So it's just a matter of that inflection point, and you will see a big growth coming in this space. Within e-mobility, again, I like to talk a bit on that. I clearly see a very sweet spot like up to 150 cc for the IC. That's the segment which is going to move towards e-mobility faster because there is an experience there. So it's not only the cost economic. We all discussed that 90 rupees a liter of a petrol makes it like 40 kilometers a day of ride on a, of a two-wheeler at a par with the IC engines. But what's also important is the experience, the zip you get from e-mobility, especially on that, more than 80 kilometers per hour kind of speed, the time it takes to go up to that speed. So that's going to differentiate from low end, requirements, which is more like will still be there for more of a commercial vehicle, like those home delivery companies will have that coming in. But on the upper end will be quicker to come in. That's what we feel about. With being a global company, we have a strong availability across, and we are seeing those experiences happening. People are taking those knowledgeable decisions, not only on economy, but also that I'm an aware citizen. I don't want to cause carbon emission issues, so I want to move to e-mobility. So that's opening from my side.
Sure, sure. Thank you very much, sir. We'll straight jump into the discussion without kind of taking any more time. We'll start with something that the government has been talking about or has been taking steps. I would direct my first question to Mr. Munjal and then subsequently to Mr. Sharma. What I would want to know from you, sir, is the government has come up with FAME 1 initially, for 2 years, then extended it to FAME 2. Some modifications, low speed two-wheelers, had to be pulled out of it. Now there is a mandate for 50% localization in FAME 2. PMP has come in. Too many things happening. There are a lot of restrictions on imports from China. So in that space, how are you seeing this overall ecosystem or the supply chain for EV two-wheelers evolving? Because at one end you have this push for electric vehicles getting, you should shift to EVs, but at the other end these are challenges which are apparent and which are visible, which is creating challenges for the industry to transition. A long-term roadmap is something which is not visible, probably, which is not helping the two-wheeler manufacturers make the kind of requisite investments in that space. And probably also as Mr. Sanghi also spoke about or alluded to, the kind of subsidies that are required for buyers to lure themselves to the two-wheeler space. So would like to know your thoughts on this, and how is localization or the ecosystem developing at an overall level?
Thank you, Himal. Absolutely. I mean, aptly put. So yes, there is intent by the government to move towards EV sector, but at the same time, the policies that we've got right now, especially the central policies, are not very effective. So if you look at it, we're already halfway down or more than halfway down in terms of the policy duration. But in terms of the products or the vehicles which are actually on the road, so the target was to get 1 million units of two-wheelers, 500,000 units of three-wheelers, and 40,000 of the cars. But if you actually look at the numbers, we are nowhere close to even 10% of that number. I mean, we are right now falling hugely short in terms of the whole policy. So which means there's something which is not working for the customer. No matter which way we put it, no matter what way we push it, the customer is not accepting the policy in the framework it is right now. One of the hindrances which is there, the problems which is there, is the speed and the range criteria, which effectively makes the batteries larger. Now, what happens with the battery, which is becoming larger, is that your initial purchase price goes up slightly, your cost of charging becomes higher, and your battery replacement cost, let's say 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years hence, is also going to be higher simply because you've got larger batteries. And there is a very large segment of customers who are not commuting 40 or 80, who are not looking at a 40-kilometer speed or not commuting 80 kilometers in a day. They're looking at a much lower commute and asking for a vehicle which is in a much more economical for them for a daily commute. So there are some hindrances there from the FAME policy. Also localization, so localization will follow a market. You cannot, it's a chicken and egg situation. Unless we actually get the market in place, it doesn't make sense for any of the supply chain vendors, even though they're talking to us. They've been talking to us for a long time, and we push a lot of vendors to actually localize and start manufacturing and investing into this, but they don't have a long-term roadmap ahead of them. So it is very, very important, if we have to do this properly, as we've seen other countries, let's emulate what is happening in some other countries, whether it's Asia or Europe or the US, etc. There are very clear-cut guidelines and roadmaps in place. If we actually didn't have a roadmap or a date for, let's say, BS6 to come in place, we possibly may not have moved to those investments wouldn't have happened, and we wouldn't have graduated from a BS4 to a BS6. The same thing is required here. One, a very clear-cut deadline. The second, push in that direction from a market creation. Once a market gets created, the network, the supply chain will all automatically fall in place. So you can set goals to say, let's get the first 3 million two-wheelers, or first let's get the first 3 million vehicles on the road. And post that, the subsidies are going to taper off. And by that time, you have to be localized to a certain extent. And beyond that, after a certain time, whether you take it a year or 2 years or whatever, you have to be 100% localized. Right now, for example, to manufacture batteries, there's a lot of battery assembly happening in India, but what about the manufacturing of batteries? Is that localization or is that not localization? If it's not localization, it makes absolutely no commercial sense for anybody at this point to set up a battery manufacturing plant. So to get the supply chain, and though we are pushing very hard our vendors and we have localized substantially this thing, but there still is dependence on imports which happen simply because there is no supply chain in India for a number of components. The cell manufacturing is one that I'm talking to you about. Like this, there are smaller parts which are not there. When you look at the overall EV industry right now in India, it's a very, very small industry. From a two-wheeler standpoint, it's just about 150,000 units. From a car standpoint, it's very small. So at this scale, to have so much of localization and have so many different vendors creating all the product range for you is not commercially viable. You are going to increase the price. There is no two ways about it. So we have to create, so the point is you have to create the market, as we've seen in e-rickshaws, for example. That's a market which is, again, a very fragmented market, but highly localized. And it got localized not because of any push anywhere. It got localized because the demand was there, because the market got converted. And the same thing would happen in other sectors as well. So while the central policy right now needs a bit of course correction, there are states which are giving it a lot of push. So we've got Delhi, for example, and we've got some other states also which are coming out with their own policies. And some of those policies are addressing some of the issues which are there with the central policy at this point.
Great. Thanks for your views, Mr. Munjal. Mr. Sharma, if you would want to add something.
Yeah, Hemant. I think my opinion is slightly different. So I would say, like, when the FAME 1 was there, it's included by the slow speed or the high speed. Then government moves to the FAME 2. And that requires certain localization level, minimum 50%. Then we talk about the performance of the product, that the speed should be 40 km/h, acceleration is something, and other parameters also. The range anxiety, it should be minimum 80 kilometers in a single charge. Actually, the purpose, what we feel as a OEM and as a customer, why the government has pushed shift from FAME 1 to FAME 2. There is, I think, the logic behind that. The government also understand how the volumes can become more and more, so that this electrification of the industry can happen. And the reason behind that, because earlier when it was a slow speed, more vehicles were there for the FAME 1, the people always consider as a consumer, when you talk about electric vehicle, they always talk that these vehicles are not a performance vehicle. So like they have the second choice or the third choice when they want to adopt the electric vehicles. So we have to start from somewhere, somehow, that the people start thinking that these electric two-wheeler also have the performance vehicle, which can match the performance with the IC engine. Then only this volume can increase. Like if you see, like all of the two-wheeler overall market for last year was more than 21 million. And that is not if all the vehicles are slow speed, for example, in IC also, if you see, like if you see the example of Luna, you see the market of the Luna and the market of the other vehicle, which is more than 100 cc another. What is the volume? So that is the reason I think the FAME 2 was coming. People should adopt the high performance vehicle that can match with the IC engine. Then the second thing is the localization. If you talk about the localization also, I think somehow I am convinced what Mr. Munjal is saying, but by the other time, why the localization required? Because the reason behind it is the quality product. Because if you have the supply chain in India, you have a more control on your product, you have a more control on your suppliers, you have more control on your supply chain. Whenever it is required, the requirement of your spare parts, the requirement of the quality announcement, you can do very fast. But when you depend on the imports, it's always a delay comes in. which will bring the satisfaction level low for the consumer point of view, for the dealer point of view. So I think when we talk about the localization, of course, the localization is increasing, because end of the day, even the supplier, maybe Mr. Bhandari also agree with me, when we talk about the electrification, of course, the supplier is also decided they have to start now, then they will build for the future. Because if they will prepare today, then only they cater the requirement for the future. It is not a magic man that today we decided, okay, let's do the make the product or component for the IC engine or for the EV, and we can start. It will take some time. There's a development time for the components. It takes 2 years, 3 years for down the line. So I think the IC engine, even the suppliers have already started making the component for EV. If you talk about, okay, now we already have more than 90% of our localized part we are using in our product. So that is not the one day job. It was a hardship of our team for last 5 years. We are talking to the supplier. Of course, supplier also understand, because the volume is not there, they doesn't make business sense for them. But now they are investing for future, because at the end of the day, the business is always talk about present and what is they are going to get in the future. So localization is also required, but as we said, like of course the volume is low today. There's a two reason behind that. One reason is, of course, the people have no confidence in the electric vehicle because of the performance of the vehicle. Although the performance vehicle is available in the market, but there is no awareness. So recently, I think government has already started this go green, go electric campaign. They have started by the central government, and 19th of February. I think that is a very good awareness program. So the people will understand that the vehicle is there, companies are there, they will cater the requirement of the consumer against the IC engine. Same way the state government, like where the Delhi, Switch Delhi campaign is coming. With the other states is also coming. Like Delhi said, they want to become the EV capital. And I think, in my opinion, the other states should also come forward in the same way. And they will also make at least one city in their state, so that the more awareness will comes in. So government has already bring many, I think, policies for that, whether it's FAME 2 incentive, whether it's the RTO exemption in many states has already comes in. So as a stakeholder, I think whether it's a manufacturer, is a consumer, is a supplier, or a customer, everyone has to come forward together and to understand how to make it more bigger market. Only incentive cannot serve the purpose, because if you see on the IC, there's no incentive. Then even there's 21 million vehicles is selling. Of course, the cost matters because of the lithium ion cell. But for the last 5 years or 10 years, if you see, already the lithium ion is already, the cost has already bring down lots of things. So, parallelly, if you do the localization of the parts in India, I think it will also enhance the quality and it will bring the cost down also. And now lithium ion cell also, I think some companies are also coming in India, and I think another couple of years, I think they will be also operational. So of course, now it's challenging is there, but it depends as a stakeholder how we convert these challenges into opportunity for the future.
Sure, good to have divergent views in the panels. It really helps. Before kind of going on to Mr. Pankaj or Mr. Nikunj or Mr. Bhandari, I would request Rohit, if we could put out a poll which is very relevant to the given situation. That what do we feel is the true impact of COVID on the two-wheeler industry, and we could continue our discussion by then. Rohit, if you could do so. Uh, Now, moving on to kind of the next kind of set of questions, if I were to ask so. uh, Now there are specifically two types of vehicles that are available in the market, which we talk about, or I would first say, let's talk about the kind of customer that we have. So if you look at the personal mobility, there is a thought process, or there is a viewpoint that people who are owning premium vehicles would ideally be the first ones to shift to electric mobility, and it will not be the mass market kind of customers who would move on to the EV space. And so what are your thoughts on that? With RE being one of the key players in the premium two-wheeler space, if Mr. Pankaj, you would want to start off there and share your views there, and then we could also have Mr. Sanghi, who's been in this space for long, and followed by Mr. Munjal and Sharma.
Thanks, Hemal. So I think, as I earlier said, the EV is the future. I mean, whether we like it or no, or someone likes it or no, it has to happen at some stage. And I think earlier also we discussed, we are in transition. There will be many challenges like Mr. Sharma mentioned and Mr. Munjal mentioned. The biggest challenge which we are seeing right now is I think all the stakeholders are coming together and forming a right road map with some timeline. I think that's the biggest challenge which we all are seeing. And as far as I think RE is concerned, in terms of premiumization, we have seen it last 10, 12 years, at least in Royal Enfield and in this two-wheeler market. And it will continue because it is, just imagine where is it coming from? It's coming from all the two-wheelers which are so-called first-time buyer, right? So there is already huge population and it will continue for next maybe many years or so. And for RE being in electric, of course, we have a team which is definitely working on it. We are closely watching this space. And we will be ready as and when customer would like to have it, we will surely be ready. So we are not out of the, let's say, space. I'm sure all the OEMs are looking at it, working on it. At some stage, I'm sure things will open up. Yeah.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Sanghi, what will be your views? How are you seeing? Is there a different set of customer you would have for a EV as compared to ICE? What are your thoughts? Where is it that the focus is, or who's the one who's looking at transitioning early?
So I don't think there's a separate set of customers, and I would want to say that every customer who's walking into a two-wheeler showroom is a target customer for EV also. And when I mentioned FAME 2, when I mentioned incentivization for two-wheelers, for personal mobility, specifically EVs, what I really was, where I was coming from, that if you look globally, you look anywhere in the world where this transition has taken place, there has been an impetus, a push by the government for adoption of EV. And once you reach a critical mass, it automatically starts happening. You create the volume, you create the space, you create the right environment for EVs to be adopted, and then it automatically happens. But clearly, there is a push which is required. I mean, even a country like China, which is probably the fastest growing country in terms of electrification of vehicles, you have seen how the Chinese market moves with the coming in of subsidy and without the subsidy. So whenever the Chinese government has reduced subsidies, has come down on subsidies, they've seen a slowdown on two-wheelers. Presently, I mean, if you look at the last few months, I think China has put in a lot of both incentives, fiscal incentives, as well as non-fiscal disincentives to promote EVs, and they've seen a comeback, a very, very fast comeback of EVs, much faster than what even the Chinese government had anticipated. So I think it's those triggers which the Indian economy is looking for. And I think once those triggers come in, there is no debate that the future is EVs. And like Mr. Pankaj Sharma said, it's only a question of time, sooner or later. But future is EVs, not in just terms of the technology. I think the ease of using an EV and the scope in which EV can do things. I mean, the disruption which comes in with an EV is unimaginable. The disruption that you see when you come to four-wheelers, when you talk of something like a Tesla, it's not just the vehicle technology, it is so many other things that the vehicle can do. And I think that's where I'm coming from, that EVs are future, and the disruption which is possible in EV is not possible in an IC engine. And I think those are the kind of disruptions which the consumer is waiting for. And I think once that starts happening, the adoption of EV is going to be much faster than what the industry is anticipating.
Sure.
The future definitely is EV.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Sanghi. Mr. Munjal, I would also like to ask you a question that, for example, if you look at a country like India, where the per capita income is still fairly low, and if we have to look at transitioning to EVs, and Mr. Sanghi mentioned or alluded to it, that you'll have to reach a critical mass if you have to look at adoption and then investment on the localization side, and further propel growth. So, do you feel that in a country like India, we have on the product side we definitely have products, but is there enough push for this particular, technology to penetrate deeper at the price at which it is today, or there is much more support that is required to ensure that there is mass adoption of two-wheelers? And would you also want to differentiate between, as Mr. Jitendra Sharma alluded earlier, with more with respect to performance oriented two-wheelers versus mass adoption two-wheelers, which are largely used for commuter purpose? Because today also, as we heard earlier, that there are people who typically use scooters for more like city purpose, at a shorter radius of about 20-25 kilometers a day at max, with lower speeds, because they would not be able to touch more than 40 kilometers an hour, in a city, probably even that's on the higher side. So your views on those areas, and then probably followed by Mr. Jitendra.
We are of a firm belief that the market at this point, and I'm talking about the near to short term market, is going to be in the city speed category. So there are actually two definitions, the low speed and high speed, but we have a third definition, which how we classify it, which is a city speed vehicle. Now, this is a vehicle which goes about 45 kilometers an hour and will give you a range of, depending on what battery you choose. We have vehicles which go from 80 kilometers upwards to 210 kilometers in terms of the range. And right now, 70% of the EV market, the two-wheeler market, is actually the low-speed market in India. And when you look at it at a global level, whether you look at China, you look at Europe, you look at the US, you look at Japan, you look at Korea, any of the markets, Vietnam, any of these markets besides Taiwan, majority of the markets actually are a low-speed market. And what's actually happening in Europe is actually an electric cycle is replacing a car for your short commutes. So when comes spring, people slow down their car buying and actually get onto bicycles and electric cycles for various reasons. It's an aging population, gives them exercise plus ease, etc. Now let's come to India. Now, what is happening? What we believe is going to happen, a commuter segment and the low end of the motorcycle and two-wheeler segment, that constitutes about 85% of the total two-wheeler market. Now, this is all below 90,000 rupee price point. Now, we don't believe that that price point, which is a commuter segment, they're going to jump to 1.5 lakhs simply because it's an electric vehicle. There would be very small early adopters, but majority of the market is going to look at a price point which is very similar to what they're paying right now. Because what they're sacrificing is, as Mr. Sanghi was also saying, financing is still there right now. Financing is still not highly prevalent in the EV sector as is in the IC sector. IC, majority of the vehicles are financed, EV, they're not at this point for various reasons. So what we believe is going to be the belly of the market actually is going to be your city speed vehicles, which is about a 40, 45, 50 kilometer speed with ample amount of torque to get you off the traffic light as being the first person off the traffic light, goes up flyovers very easily, but your speed is about 40, 45, because what we are trying to do is blend the speed, performance, and the cost together. So we are trying to get the maximum value out of that battery and out of that technology that is there in the electric mobility in order to make it affordable for you to buy. So we've got our city speed vehicle, just to give you an example, at less than 58,000 rupees now. Now at that price point, it's far cheaper than a 100cc engine vehicle. It is far more economical to run. So if you're running 40 kilometers a day or 50 kilometers a day, that guy's going to use 1 liter of fuel. We are using 1.5 units of power. So you're comparing 90 rupees versus 12 rupees. The difference is huge. So the initial purchase price is lower. Your difference in the battery, in your running cost is lower. And when it comes down to replacement of that battery, we're talking about a much more nominal amount than what it would cost even to service those IC engine vehicles over the next 3 to 5 years. So what we believe is going to be, there is going to be a pyramid as there is with IC engine. There would be high-end vehicles and there would be low-end and there would be city speed vehicles. So there would be low speed, city speed, and the high end. And the pyramid is going to be similar to that of the IC engine vehicles. What we believe and what we would like to play in is in a very large belly of the market where we are going to be, as it is, this category is a niche. The minute you're going into the high speed, high performance, your cost is going up dramatically. You're highly dependent on subsidies. Your battery replacement cost is going to go up. And it is not economical for you to run as against the IC engine. So if you look at it, a 3 kilowatt hour motor or a 3 kilowatt hour battery is non-portable. So you need the charging infrastructure. We have limitations in India, which is why we've made our entire range for the batteries are portable. So you can actually take them in to your apartment, charge them, plug them back into the vehicle. This is in the absence of a charging infrastructure. If we had a charging infrastructure as dense as what they have in China, you don't need such a huge battery then in your vehicle. you could do with a smaller battery because you're not going very far, thereby bringing the cost down, thereby making it more interesting. But we have our limitations as we have in India, and we are doing the best with those. And right now, these vehicles are in terms of performance, almost as good as the IC engine vehicle, far more economical to run, far economical to own, and with a warranty which goes up to 5 years in the case of the vehicle. So I believe it's going to be the city speed vehicles which are actually going to play be a very important part, the commuter vehicles, as is for IC engine vehicles as well.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Munjal. Thank you. Mr. Chitendra Sharma, your views on the same?
Yeah, first of all, I'm very happy to hear from all the panelists, and they are saying future is electric. So I think it is good for everyone to understand this. Right. By the same time, I think when we talk about the speed performance vehicle, which I talked earlier, that doesn't mean it's a racing motorcycle or a scooter. I mean, the speed should be 100 kilometers. Performance vehicle means people have the faith on the product quality. It means if it is city speed, even the FAME 2 also talk about the same thing. They said the speed should be more than 45 kilometers per hour. Okay, and the range should be 80 kilometers. Of course, the people are not driving the vehicle for 80 kilometers every day. Maybe they are just driving maybe 30, 40 kilometers a day. But the main mindset of the people is their range anxiety, because they always have their thought in their mind. Once they come out from their home, whether they will come back or not.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you just a small thing. When we started Okinawa, before that I did the research on the EV. Even personally, I visit to many villages of India. Okay, I discussed with the people. So what is their thought about the EV? They said, some people told me, Uncle, cycle wala mere se aage chala jata hai. So that is the thought process of that time when I'm talking about 2015. So people have that mindset in India. When you talk about electric, they always thought, oh, it's a maybe second thought product we will take when it is required for the second or third vehicle at our home. But now the mindset of the people is changing, because they understand now whether it's a speed vehicle or maybe the performance vehicle, the technology is available. The product is good quality product, which is reasonably, I would say, reasonable quality at reasonable cost. Good quality at reasonable cost. That is the thought process of Indian consumer, because India is a very cost sensitive market. When we want to spend even a single rupee or 100 rupees, India, we always think twice or thrice, especially in the B town city or C town city, because where is the cost of living, or maybe the cost of 1 rupee is very important for everyone, especially for even the metro also, if I say. So that is the way even the EV is more affordable for them. Of course, maybe like other country, when you talk about China or other country where the range is not a big thing for them, because there is maybe they are running 30, 40 kilometers a day or 20 kilometers. They have a small battery pack. But that mindset has changed after a long time. They understand now EV adoption is very easy for them. It's economical, viable for them, and they can trust on the quality of the product. So same way for India also, because we have to, first of all, we have to bring the awareness to the consumer. They must trust on the EV product. The product is reasonably good. If they will buy, they are not cheated. If they will use the product, it is good, give the same performance, what they think in their mind with the IC engine. Because all of us, when we born with the IC engine only in India. We don't know about EV. It's a EV, of course, it's a old technology. It may be earlier, 100 years also ago, it was developed. But if you see it is coming in India in a rapid way, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. But that, by the same time, we have to change the mindset of the IC engine who are using this product. So we have to give the good quality with a reasonable cost. And of course, maybe in future, whether how it will be happen, it is the most important, the awareness. Whether it's from the government side, it is from OEM side, or maybe the media or other people. Once the awareness will come more, people will adopt more EV vehicle, and it will be reasonably for everyone to adopt it, because it's a question of always demand and supply. If your demand is there, supply will be more, cost of the product reasonably goes down. Then after some time, it doesn't require any incentive, because as I told earlier also, for the IC engine, they are not getting incentive, because now the thrust is more important, push is required now. Once we are going to a reasonable numbers in the market, of course, then people will go by themselves, and the cost of the product is reasonably down. So it will be affordable for everyone. So of course, future is there. Market is going to happen for EV. Of course, the time matters, and I think time has come. Now it will take some time to, of course, to reach to that IC level, but it will be, you see, in the next 2-3 years, there is a lots of changes will going to happen in the automobile industry, especially for two-wheeler or three-wheeler.
So thank you very much for your views, sir. Before moving on to question which is very specific to the component side, which I would like to pose to Mr. Bhandari. If Rohit, you could just flash the poll results, and then we can move to that question. So you see that COVID will increase the demand in the near to medium term is what 66% people or 2/3 of the people are saying. So which is very, very good and should be very heartening for the industry as a whole, going forward. Now moving on to Mr. Bhandari, there is a specific question that I have for you. We've been talking about electric vehicles, and India has been an ICE vehicle market throughout. In an EV, the NVH levels are very, very low, and there is no noise per se, and I also saw a short advertisement which was played by Rohit earlier, where chains are being replaced by belts, and you are one of the leading power transmission solution provider. So how do you see your role fit into this e-mobility space, and is there any one type of standard belt that you use for this purpose, or there are various varieties of belts that you use probably for e-mobility in the EV two-wheeler space specifically? If you could throw some light on that area, sir.
Yeah, just to start with, the motors are either hub mounted or mid mounted, so we come into play when it is mid mounted. Hub motors are typically for low speeds, where you don't have that zip thing and torque requirements are lower. When you have requirements which are higher and you want to drive at a high speed, so there we comes into play in terms of transmitting power from the motor to the wheels. So that's number one. Number two, what we bring in a change is number one, chain versus belt. So the belt, proprietary belt we have is called poly chain, which is much more stronger, and it doesn't elongate, it doesn't undergo dimensional change on a usage, and it doesn't. It has very good resistance to the environment. So that means the oil, water, and accordingly, the contaminants, it holds very well on that. So that's a specialized belt we have, and that was the invention done by Gates many years back. And actually, we have system provider in this space since 2012. So what this polychain belt does is it is noiseless. It gives you a noiseless performance. It has a longevity of life much better than the chain. And then what it does, it's a maintenance free. Typically in a chain, you have a regular maintenance required to have to maintain the efficiency level of the chain. So we bring in that part. Now, what Gates does, in this space is not only the product, it is also like we have already developed our R&D space in India in terms of we already have know-how. And we are now not only supporting our India customers, we are also supporting overseas customers. So to earlier point made by Mr. Sharma, that the supplier base has to also look at the lower volumes and then climb up. So there are different ways of looking at it. We are now not only supplying to India customers, we are supplying overseas also. We have our own dyno and test bench. What it means is we can hasten the process of development, design development. So we have our own application engineering, system engineering team in place in India to support our India customers. So that's where we bring in a big change. We are not only a belt supplier, we actually supply the complete transmission system. And that we do have rubber mobility also. But then again, when I say rubber mobility is rubber belts, the rubber belts are also there as part of the offering, but the rubber belts are good at 20,000 kilometer life kind of thing. And it also undergoes elongation, over a period of time. Whereas in case of polychain, what I am mentioning is it doesn't require maintenance. It doesn't have a dimensional change. So it's a great, solution we have already. We are ready for the market. We are just waiting that when the adoption happens and when our customer comes more asking for the local development to be done. So we have done all the studies. We have done all that NVH calculation, what you mentioned. This study is all in place and we are well aware about that.
Sure. Thanks for your response on that, Mr. Bhandari. Mr. Pankaj, I would like to come back to you, and ask you another question. RE is one of the leading players in the motorcycle space, and with all the talk going around e-mobility, uh, what are your thoughts? Do you feel that motorcycles are relatively more sheltered as compared to scooters with respect to EV adoption, and probably it will be scooters who will take the lead, and there is still some more time for motorcycles to you know lead the adoption in the EV front. What is your thought on that in that regard, sir?
My view is one cannot exclude any particular segment from the EV. But what no one knows is where will it start from? Of course, it is starting from, let's say, scooter in, like Mr. Manjal said, in the cities or maybe little outside cities for a shorter distance. So, I mean, I don't think one can say no, it will not happen on motorcycle or it will only happen on scooter space. It will happen across. And I think the biggest thing is when customer decides to move, then no one can stop him, right? And we have seen in the past many, let's say, changes or so-called transitional changes, which people have never imagined 10 years back, but within 10 years, you see completely it's from 0 to 100%, right? For example, look at the Android and iOS platform from the Nokia and the BlackBerry, right?
Sure,
So,
sure.
but what we all have to do is keep an eye on it and be present at the right time when it is required. And I think from our point of view, we always keep customer interest in mind. I'm sure everybody does that, but if at and like I said earlier, we have a team who is working on it, who's closely watching this space, and as and when our customer, our set of customers, when they want, I'm sure we will be there. I mean, it will never be too late for us. But let's remember one more thing also. I mean, IC is not going to go out. Even in this
Absolutely.
transition from 0 to 100%, we don't know. It might take 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And imagine the let's say the size of this business of two-wheeler business is so huge. And I'm sure another 20, 25 years, both might coexist. So you never
Absolutely.
know. It
Absolutely.
is only these percentage, like Paul mentioned, starting with 150,000 on a scale of maybe 12, 30 million out of it. It might move very slowly. When at that time, when the inflection point will come, then this shift will come. So it definitely has to happen. Yeah.
Great, great. Sure, sure. Mr. Sanghi, you also have a Hero dealership, and you deal with customers day in, day out. Hero being one of the primary players in the motorcycle space. And as you said, any kind of customer would be fit to buy an electric vehicle. So, do you see transition happening even on the motorcycle front for two-wheelers, or you see that the customer has a different mindset, when he comes to buy a motorcycle vis-a-vis a scooter, and hence transition on the scooter side is going to be more faster? What are your thoughts on that space?
I think, like Mr. Pankaj Sharma said, probably scooters will definitely be the ones which will get into the EV space faster. But why I said every customer is a target customer, so there are customers for motorcycles who are using it for commuting within the city. So, how many office goers, how many students, how many are using those commuter bikes to do what they are doing? And I'm sure they are the customers for EVs, because with the fuel prices going up, with affordability of fuel going up, EVs is definitely a solution. And therefore, I feel that commuter bikes specifically used within the city are also a game for electrification. And that is the reason why I said that probably electrification will come much faster than any one of us can think of, provided there is that trigger which the government needs to put. I mean, I'll give you a very strange example of cooking gas. I mean, cooking gas was subsidized like nobody's business, and everybody adopted cooking gas. And today, with no subsidies, cooking gas is still because people have got used to the convenience of cooking gas. Similarly, I feel that that trigger is required, and once the trigger comes, then electrification is bound to happen, and happen much faster than we anticipate.
So one more point there, is it more like a chicken and egg story, where you feel that since there is no model available in the motorcycle space, barring a Revolt that you have, you are probably seeing more traction towards scooters, or you would not say that is the reason?
No, so that definitely is one of the reasons. That definitely is one of the reasons because everybody see why motorcycle is not happening is because everybody feels that scooters are the low hanging fruits, and investment in scooters will probably give a faster return than investment in motorcycles. But I think once people so if a hero can be both in scooters and motorcycles, I'm sure any electric vehicle manufacturer can have a complete range of two-wheelers and not just scooters.
Sure.
So I think once Mr. Naveen Munjal starts looking at motorcycles in the commuter segment, like he is doing for scooters, I'm sure there'll be takers for commuter segment motorcycles also in the EV space.
Sure, great, great. I think, on that note, we can have our other poll, which is very relevant. Which segment will drive maximum sale of two-wheelers? Whether it be motorcycles, scooters, or mopeds. If we could have that, poll, it will be really helpful, Rohit. And in the meanwhile, we'll go to Mr. Munjal and Mr. Jitendra Sharma. As to why is it that scooters were the first obvious choice to come up with with respect to EV two-wheelers and not motorcycles. Any thoughts on that front?
Number of reasons actually, Himal. So
Sure.
when we look at the two-wheeler market globally, leave India aside. India is a unique case. But if you look at Asia, you look at Europe, you look at any other market, motorcycles are generally more higher powered.
Right.
And what you actually have is step-through motorcycles, the mokicks as we call them, or you have scooters, which is there for us a commuter segment.
Right.
In India, the market graduated to motorcycles for various reasons in the early 80s, 90s, and that's where the market, it became so strong, the technology was so advanced.
Right.
When you look at scooters and when you look at electric scooters, particularly at this point of time, see, what is it that we are working towards? There are a number of factors. One, your battery is actually kept much lower than it would be in a motorcycle because the form factor of a motorcycle is such that the minute you put a lot of batteries, you got to put them really low down to keep the center of gravity low. The second factor is when you look at a motorcycle, the expectation of performance is very different to that of a scooter. I can't imagine a motorcycle which looks, we showcased a motorcycle last year at Auto Expo, but we haven't launched it yet and we're waiting for the right time to launch it. But can you imagine a motorcycle which looks really cool and everything, but only goes to 50 or 60 kilometers an hour? So for customer, there is a need and there is a want. The customers would want a motorcycle to do much better.
Sure.
But with that comes the issues of the battery pricing, the battery replacement, the battery portability. In a scooter, it's much easier to take out the batteries. It is possible to take out the batteries in a motorcycle also, but at the same time, you're looking at a 24 kilo battery, which is not highly portable. So one is the form factor. The second is the convenience and ease of use. Now, what we've done with our vehicles is because of the space that you have below the seat in a scooter, we've been able to put multiple different batteries there. So we have a modular battery system, anything from 1 to 3 batteries, depending on usage and usability. So if you're a user who doesn't really go that far, you could do with one battery, which will give you about a 70, 80 kilometer range. Whereas if you're a user, where we've done for a number of our B2B customers, we're giving them a 200 kilometer range as well, using 3 battery systems. And all of those batteries are swappable. So going forward, there are going to be all forms as we have with the auto industry. So see, when you have to look at the future, actually, you have to look at what's happened in the past. How has the automobile industry really graduated? And that is what is going to dictate how this industry is also going to graduate, because a large customer base for us is also the similar customer base as to the IC industry.
Sure.
So if we've graduated in a certain manner there, we are going to follow a somewhat of a similar path, but here the path may be much faster. So that's why when I talk about the commuter segment, for example, when I look at the whole commuter segment, when the price band of that commuter segment is of a certain price, which is below 1 lakh rupees,
Sure.
I don't believe that suddenly here the majority of the vehicles are going to be above 1 lakh rupees. I
Sure.
believe at this point, it's going to be within that same band. Going forward, motorcycles, scooters, speed motorcycles, everything is going to be here.
Sure.
But at this point, short to near term, it is going to be scooters which are going to really take the lead.
Thanks for your response, sir. Mr. Jitendra Sharma, you would like to add on?
Yes, Himal. If you see the automobile industry in India, Before 90s, if you see, all the technology was two-stroke engine mainly. So when we migrate from there to the four-stroke technology, that time earlier there is a market of scooters. Once we converted into 2000, the norms has changed, emission norms has changed. The market segment has transformed from scooter to the motorcycle.
Motorcycles.
But by the same time, that time there is lots of technology availability, product availability of that technology, which will give the good, you can say, performance or whatever the needs of the consumer. That was not available. But once if you see how the market transformation happened, of course, total 21 million of vehicle, of course, the major pie is by the motorcycle because that is more popular in the rural area of India, if you see. And the other part of also maybe the students or maybe because motorcycle is always a male oriented product. But when we talk about the scooter, it's a unisex where the female as well as a male can ride the vehicle. Once the Activa comes in India, if you have seen, the change happens. The good amount of vehicles has been sold by the Honda also and other like players like whether Suzuki or maybe the TVS who are making the scooters of that category. They also get the good amount of volumes for that also because that the technology comes in, product availability is there, and where the even the women have that pride to ride the scooters also by themselves. Earlier, if you see, maybe 20 years back, so most of the riders you find only male. Females was riding very less. But now the trend has changed. Even the motorcycle is also run by women also, by the girls also.
Right.
So the trend is changing. Of course, in case of EV, there's are two things behind that. Of course, one is the technology, other is the mass adoption.
Sure.
Of the scooters, because why it comes first, because we have to see how the mass adoption is going to happen. That will make sense for demand and supply.
Sure.
The scooter is adopted in the EV segment more. Initially, people understand the technology. The important part of the EV is the look is the you can say drive and feel, touch and feel. Because if you never drive the EV vehicle, you don't understand the technology. What is the whether it's a smooth ride or not. So in the EV space, if you ride the EV, I can bet you once you ride the EV, you will always go for the EV because there is no sound. The initial torque is too high. The smooth ride is very smooth. Economics also make viable for them. So there is a lots of things. Of course, the motorcycle is also going to happen. It's nobody can stop it because overall market is going to happen with the you can say contribution of scooter as well as motorcycle only. So that is going to happen, but it's only time. Of course, many players are coming. In fact, Okinawa is also coming with the motorcycle in this financial year, also next financial year, coming financial year. So
Fantastic.
that is the thing because we understand. If you see as a what Mr. Sanghi said, as a company, the combination is only fulfilled when you are making the scooter as well as the motorcycle also. Then you can cater the requirement of a consumer. So it's only a time when it is going to adopt. Scooter comes first because of the unisex where everyone can drive, whether it's a male or female of your family. People will adopt this technology, understand EV, they like it. Then of course, second step will be the motorcycle. They comes in. So you have the choice for everything. So
Sure.
electrification is going to happen in both the segment.
Sure, sure. Thank you for your response, sir. Rohit, we can have the poll results out. If they are already out. It'll be good to see what people have to say. Yeah, so scooters leading the pack with about 74%, and then probably followed by motorcycles is what even people feel so. Uh, you know, Getting a little more deep into what we've been speaking about, performance and the way people are looking at EVs in terms of range, kind of torque, etc. And then touching base on that question, also something that was mentioned by Mr. Bhandari earlier. I would like to pick one question, which has come in the Q&A window, which says that mid motor provides more flexibility when it comes to torque, speed, range, performance, and efficiency. While most OEMs are opting for hub motor drives, will it be more viable to change over to mid motor drive so that the customer experience is closer to ICE drive experience? Are OEMs willing to go that way? Yeah, I would request Mr. Naveen or Mr. Jitendra to take up this question. I know, because this will also involve an element of uh, uh, higher cost, and hence the bargain between a BLDC hub motor and mid motor. So if you could share your views on this, sir.
Mr. Sharma, you want to go first or should I go?
It's okay, I can say. It's okay.
Actually, आप करिए, then I come after you.
Sure, thank you. So Himal, of course, the whosoever is the person he asked, he's right asked the right question. And I think if you talk about why the BLDC and the center mounting motor, when you talk about the BLDC, of course, this technology is an old technology. Because if you see BLDC motor, what is that? Even we are using this BLDC motor in our fan also. That is also motor. That is a BLDC also. Because this technology is very old, and when it adopted to the EV, that time the center motor was not even innovated. You can say it was not adopted because of the high cost or the other technology also. Of course, the better part of this center motor, of course, maybe Mr. Bhandari also knows when the power transmission is very good. Even the efficiency of the motor is good because the CG of the product is better than this. When you talk about the center mounting motor, center of gravity is better in that case. The performance of the product is good because you will get the more efficiency. But by the same time, you need a high power motor when you talk about the center motor. It's not like that maybe you are using the BLDC motor for 800 watt, whatever the efficiency you are getting in the 800 watt, when you talk about the center motor, the efficiency will not get in the same manner. So this is the new technology, but for the consumer customer experience, of course, when they will drive the center mounting motor, their performance in because of the ergonomics, because of the center of gravity, they will find more fun when they will drive the center mounting product in terms of the BLDC motor. But now, very soon, all the OEMs, whether it's Okinawa or maybe Hero, other people, they are also going to adopt this technology in future. Like our product, which are coming in future, we are coming with the center mounting motor only. So the things are changing because now this product is become more electric rather than more electronics. More good product, good technology, good innovation. So everyone is working on that, and of course, our Indian consumer will love to drive those vehicles in future also and in present also.
Sure, Mr. Munjal, you would like to add on
Yeah,
there?
so basically, see, when you look at this market and how this market is graduated, so it's an evolution. I mean, this is going to continue changing. We were earlier lead acid battery, this thing, 250 watt motors, graduating from there to higher performance, and the batteries have changed, chemistries changed. We ourselves have changed our chemistry 4 times. So at this point, what we find is up to a certain performance level, a BLDC motor, a pancake motor is actually more efficient and easier for a customer to maintain and use. The minute you go to a certain level, at that point, you need a center drive motor, and which is where the conversions would happen. But right now, majority of our vehicles, actually, like I said, we are targeting the city speed, and we are trying to make the vehicles as efficient as possible, as user-friendly as possible, and as less maintenance as possible. And which is why the BLDC motor comes into play. It's also a matter of cost, as Mr. Sharma was saying. It's also a matter. So when you start this whole industry, what we didn't believe is going to happen is the conversion is not going to happen from the top down. The conversion is going to happen where you actually get the masses. Yeah, where you get the masses, you get the volumes. And on top of that, again, I talk about the pyramid because I love the pyramid structure. But when the masses are where the pyramid base is going to be, and then everything else is going to ride on top. So you are going to have, like I said, high performance motorcycles. We'll use central drive motors. And we will have different kinds of technologies being played out in motors. And eventually, 20 years from now, who knows, we'll be looking at hydrogen fuel cell as well. I mean, that's also the direction. But right now, the vehicles that we have, and majority of the category of the vehicles which are there, a BLDC makes more economical and performance sense at this point of time. But that is going to change over a period of time.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Munjal. Thanks for your thoughts there. I think we could go on for the entire day if we were to continue our discussion the way it's going on. But I think we have to be a little conscious of the time since all of us would have some different engagements. There are a lot of questions which have come in the Q&A window. So if Rohit, you would want to start off with a few questions, or else you could be going on through the day. Rohit,
yeah. So I'll start with the questions first. Hemal, in the meantime, you can scan and maybe ask the other ones.
Sure.
So I'll start first with the most popular question we've received, and I'm going to go to Mr. Munjal with this one because I scanned your LinkedIn feed yesterday, and you had shared something on similar lines. So Mr. Naval Lodha has asked, what is the ratio of two-wheeler EV sales when it comes to direct sort of consumer sales like B2C commuters and between the gig workers? So that is the first part of the question, and maybe once you answer that, maybe I can move on to the next part.
So I would classify the gig workers as a B2B category at this point.
Exactly. Yeah.
So even though it may be an individual buying it, but he's buying it for a different, for a business purpose. So I'm putting it in the B2B category, even though he may not be a mass volume. So the total market, the ratio, it's different for different manufacturers. For us, B2B is a very, very important area. And for us, 9%, just short of 10% is actually the B2B segment as against our B2C volume. But in 2025, our estimate is that that number is going to be anything from 30 to 35% of the total market is actually going to be B2B market. And that includes your deliveries, it includes your e-commerce, it includes your gig workers as you're talking about them. It includes also campuses where they're using electric mobility and shared mobility. So 30-35 is our basic guesstimate of how the market is going to convert. At this point, it's about sub 10%.
And the second part of that question is that, something that was touched upon in the discussion was, the challenge related to EV financing. So what innovations are you expecting? I mean, when it comes to that front, what would support?
See, it's not a matter of innovations as much. So basically what we find, we've got about 10 relationships with the various banks and with various financiers and leasing companies. For the large ones which have the infrastructure, which have the wherewithal, for them, it's a chicken and egg situation. If you look at the entire market, it's 150,000 unit market. For them to penetrate and put that systems in place across the country, it's just a very slow process. So they're waiting for the volumes to increase, and we are waiting for them to put in the financing before the volume increases. The other side is the guys, the new players who are using technology to their advantage. Those people are far better in terms of financing the vehicles, but they have a limitation in terms of the bandwidth. How many cities can they really manage it? Can they manage the volume? But what we found is over the last 4-5 years that we've had these relationships, they've had no bad debts. So year on year, they are actually increasing the push on financing. And what the banks and the other NBFCs are realizing is that if they don't push it, the new guys are going to actually come in and eat the cake. So they are getting a little more aggressive now. So far, the numbers have been very low. It's been sub 6-7% for financing of electric mobility as against IC engine. But I expect that to change very rapidly. In spite of the number being low, we are seeing growth year on year. And this year, in fact, we are going to more than double from the previous year. So we are seeing growth in spite of the financing not being there properly in place. And the issue has been to determination of the resale value of the product. What happens 3 or 5 years or 7 years ahead? How do we really determine the second-hand value of the product? For IC, it's very well established. It's been there for many decades, and that market has got established. In electric, it's still to really get established. But that said, there is technology on the vehicle. So should somebody not pay their premium, for example, you can immediately brick the vehicle sitting remotely, and the vehicle would be no good to anybody. So all those technologies are there in those vehicles. It's just a matter of getting the whole churn moving. It's like, you're rolling the ball off the top of a mountain, you're pushing it, and it's going to then gather steam as we go along.
One question, which is coming in the audience from Mr. Suresh Ethirajan is that what will be the future impact of roadside mechanics and retailers when the EV system is completely implemented? Very interesting question. Mr.
I
Sanghi.
love this question. And Mr. Sanghi, I would also like to just address it later with Mr. Sanghi.
Sure.
Mr. Sanghi, if you could answer this one.
So I think I would broaden the question to not just roadside mechanics. With the coming in of EVs, I think the role of service centers will definitely dramatically reduce as compared to an IC engine vehicles. And that has been a concern of a lot of even dealerships, because I think it's very widely known that the number of moving components in an EV are
much lower,
dramatically lower as compared to an IC engine, and therefore the cost of maintenance or the requirement for maintenance is going to be poor. So I think it's going to impact roadside mechanics, and but I think IC engines will coexist for a very, very long time and probably graduate on to be there. And as long as IC engines are there and the existing population of IC engines, which is huge, it's not going to disintegrate, it's not going to go down. So they will remain relevant, but I think their relevance will dramatically come down as we go forward. over to Mr. Munjal. I mean, he has
So I just wanted to actually address it. So initially, when we started off, we found that people they would have a flat tire or they would have some issues with the vehicle, and you're not necessarily going to be close to a dealership. I mean, no matter how large a dealership network that we have over 500 already dedicated dealerships. But nevertheless, for a country like India, that's a very, very small number at this point. So very quickly, what we started doing is actually training these roadside mechanics. And once, if a customer used to go a number of years back, the roadside mechanic would say, "Sab, I don't know this product. मैं नहीं जानता हूँ ये electrical product है." And we didn't want that. So what we've been doing over the last number of years is creating a concept called a PGO, Preferred Garage Owners. Now, these are your roadside mechanics. We've already trained 3,500 of these guys across the country to fix electric vehicles. And effectively, I mean, they could be fixing anybody's electric vehicle. But the point is to give them enough training in order to be able to fix those initial problems that happen. If it's a larger thing, then for battery issue, etc. And these guys are linked to a dealership. So we've already trained 3,500 of them. 500 of them have gone advanced training. So they are able to, even they are maintaining spares, also some spares at their end. Should there be a problem, they can fix that problem very quickly. So these are some of the hindrances which used to be there, but we have been addressing them in training these people up.
Right.
Okay.
Rohit, you would want to ask a few more, which are there in the chat box.
Yeah. So I think one thing that we weren't able to touch upon as part of our discussion was, when it comes to connectivity. Okay. So when we talk about EV players, like let's say, we gave examples of Tesla and all of that. Connectivity is a big part of, its attraction. So the question is that EV is, price is a touchy topic for the Indian customer, and especially when it comes to EV versus ICE. So do you think connectivity in terms of its importance, how important it is, and how do you keep the price in check while providing connectivity at the same time, keeping it affordable? I mean, sort of how to balance that equation. If anyone, I open the floor if anybody would like to take this one.
So all that I would say that connectivity is going to be a key to EVs, and why I say connectivity is going to be a key is because a connected vehicle can do far more than a vehicle which is not connected, and I think that's one very big plus that I talked about when I even referred to Tesla. So there are apps, there are going to be a lot of apps which can be used along with the vehicle. And I think those are the conveniences which the customer will look for. So like the mobile phone is doing much more than just being used as a telephone. I think EVs also will get into that space, and for which connectivity is going to be the key.
Okay. Great.
Just make small comments. My point,
Sure.
electric and connectivity both are different. Of course, they both may coexist, but both can happen also independently.
Right.
Don't have to be connected if you are not electric, right? So, because connected is very, very customer, I would say from safety point of view is very good, from his control point of view is very good, and it is also good for OEM to know about the product and the usage of the customers, right? So whether it is IC or electric, connected is definitely will be there. And we have seen in cars, and I think this is moving from four-wheeler to two-wheeler now. We have seen how good they are, how useful it is also for the customer and also for the OEM. Now that piece has to move into two-wheelers also.
We are already seeing, detachable batteries, which are made available by most of the OEMs these days, in the two-wheeler space. The government has come up with some kind of regulations on swappable batteries. We are also seeing, the likes of KTM, Honda, Yamaha, globally joining hands to, see that this comes up at a rapid pace. Do you see standardization of batteries happening very soon, and do you see this picking up in India at a faster pace, like what we've seen, say, in countries like Taiwan? Anybody would like to answer this question?
Yeah. So Himal, if you talk about this swapping of the batteries, of course, government is working on this project, not today, maybe 5 years ago also they were working on that. But the main important point is that whatever the product all the OEMs are manufacturing, whether the specification is same or not, because as a powertrain of the electric vehicles, battery is a very important part of it, because there is a BMS nowadays. A BMS, we can use a firmware like hardware BMS or the software BMS. where you have all these connective vehicle, like maybe geofencing, locate my vehicle, drivability of that riders. You can also locate maintenance, battery life, a lots of things in the electric vehicle. And battery is a very important part of it, because when you talk about the powertrain, whether it's a battery, motor, or the controller, the synchronization of all the three parts is very, very important. Otherwise, the product performance will not come out.
Sure.
So that is the thing. If you want to do the swapping of the battery pack should be common for across the OEMs. Maybe there is set rules or the regulation should comes in, but of course it will come. It will not come rapidly. It will take some long time. Whether the OEMs have to set up their own swapping station, or the government will bring, or the aggregator will comes in. But for that, battery should be have the common, you can say voltage or the common pack for that. But it needs a volume, because like the petrol pumps, if you have a petrol pump after every 200 meter or maybe 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer, same way if the swapping station is like this, but then it's a volume that makes the business sense. So it may become, but it will come in future, not now. It will take some time, and that needs to be collectively. You have all the OEMs, all the stakeholders have to work together to see whether the feasibility is there or not, depending upon the product performance, product quality.
Mr. Munjal, you wanted to talk
so just to add to that, what we believe is that battery swapping. So we made our batteries portable for all our vehicles, as I was saying earlier, and that's for the convenience of customers, and because we don't have infrastructure for charging in buildings, etc., all of that stuff. When it comes to particularly swapping, now there we believe that it's going to actually be more for B2B to start with, and then B2C. It's again a chicken and egg. You can't have a battery swapping. You can't have 10 stations, for example, in a city like Delhi, and then say that I've got a swapping solution in place. It's not going to work. If you're going to have to drive 5 or 10 kilometers out to go and swap a battery, it's not going to work. Why it's successful in a country like Taiwan is because there's one company who's doing it. So they've got complete standardization of the battery form factor, the chemistry that goes in, plus the technology that goes in. How do you get the manufacturers, various different guys, and this is a technology which is still evolving, the battery technology. How do you really get them to talk to each other? We had 3 companies who we were working with, or we are working with, and all 3 have different form factor. It's like saying if I'm buying a car, I can only go to a IOC or a BPCL petrol pump and not to the others. That is a problem which exists right now. But I think swapping is something which is still a little while away for consumers. And it may not even actually happen, provided that there is enough charging infrastructure, the battery density increases. The battery prices are dropping, but for B2B, it absolutely makes sense. It makes sense for the guy to go deliver his goods, come back, swap his battery, and then run again. So B2C still remains to be seen how it's going to happen, but we are ready to adopt that technology should somebody really set up a dense charging infrastructure.
Sure. Rohit,
Okay.
if you would want to, we have time for a question probably.
Yeah, just a quick question. So another, super popular question that we've received is, what kind of percentage of localization is being adopted in EVs? Okay. Since promoting design and development locally right from inception will provide an upper edge and advantage towards cost optimization. Radhika Nalavade asked this question, and Mr. Bhandari, given you sort of have done this study on the market and all of that, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, as far as this power transmission is concerned, whether the OEMs requires it or not, that's the one question I think Naveen earlier addressed. But if the OEM picks up a mid-mounted motor, we are ready for it. We are ready with the variable solutions. Of a la carte, you can pick up what you want. What's your ratio, belt ratio, what you want. What's the speed at which you want to run? What's your requirement in terms of the driving experience? We have done an intense study of the Indian roads, the quality of roads, what we have. So the duty cycles have already been established accordingly, and we know the solution. If you are looking for a 20,000 kilometer life, there is a different solution. If you're looking at 40, 50, 70, we have a solution for all of it. So that side, I can confirm you that 100% localization with a very strong Gates Corporation and a global backup of R&D is in place. Now, rest of it, I think you heard it, battery is still a challenge. Motor, yes, it is happening. And again, that space, some MNCs are doing a great job in terms of bringing localization here. And that can be a very good, production incentive scheme. We are seeing all those government schemes coming in. That will be definitely one of a area for MNCs to look at, and even the local companies, to look at developing that locally.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bhandari, for your view. Probably we can have our last poll, Rohit, before, we conclude. And, I would also like to thank everyone for, your time that you could make it to this panel and share your views. What is very imminent is, the future is definitely electric. It's just that, when is it, and by what quantum do we see electrification happening in the next couple of years? Probably the intent of each one of us is to ensure that we see higher penetrations going forward and support from all stakeholders as we go along, because it's not going to be just one person who's going to carry the torch, but the entire ecosystem that has to move together. So thank you very much for your time. Rohit, anything you would like to add on?
So I'll just end the poll and share the results. Maybe we can, just share the final results, and then I can just say a quick bye.
Oh, that's whooping. Yeah, 30%, 20 to 30% electrification by fiscal 26. We are, even on today's size, we are looking at about 6 million vehicles, which is phenomenal. So I'm sure, that brings a smile to Mr. Munjal's face and Mr. Jitendra Sharma's face. And then, I'm sure, these are the kind of volumes that you would be aspiring or gunning for, going forward.
Great. So thank you all for joining us for today's live session. We hope you, found this session, enjoyed the session and found it useful. And firstly, I would like to thank our speaker group for taking out the time for the busy schedule for this. We really appreciate your support. And secondly, I would like to thank our audience for their inquisitiveness and their attention. We received well over 50 questions and a lot of, chatter on the chat box. So thank you so much. And finally, I wanted to take this time to especially thank our partner Gates for supporting us on this session. So thank you all once again for joining this session. We have many more lined up, so please stay tuned and do join us for the same. And also, as mentioned earlier, we are planning for a physical event over the course of the next 3-4 months in Delhi. And it would be great if you can share your thoughts on the same in the short survey that will open in your browser as we end the session. Your insights will be greatly appreciated and shouldn't take you more than a couple of minutes. In the meantime, here is a goodbye from all of us. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Hemal. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye.